Inside that small barangay chapel, the air was thick with the scent of sampaguita flowers and burning candles, their flickering light casting long, trembling shadows against the wooden walls. Maria stood at the altar, her white lace dress glowing under the dim yellow bulbs, her hands trembling as she clutched a bouquet of wild orchids. She was the most beautiful bride their village had ever seen, her skin like polished mahogany, her dark eyes shimmering with unshed tears of joy. The entire town had come to witness her union with Miguel, the kind-hearted farmer who had won her heart with his quiet strength and gentle laughter. Even the old women whispered that theirs was a love blessed by the saints, a rare thing in a place where marriages were often arranged for land or money. But not everyone was smiling. At the back of the chapel, half hidden in the shadows, sat Lola Zelda, Maria's stepmother. The old woman's lips were pressed into a thin, bloodless line, her gnarled fingers gripping the pew like claws. She had never approved of Miguel, not because he was unworthy, but because Maria was not supposed to be happy, not after what had happened to her mother. The ceremony passed in a blur of prayers and promises. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in cheers, tossing rice and coins as the newlyweds walked down the aisle. Maria laughed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. But then, she saw Lola Zelda standing near the door, her black shawl draped over her hunched shoulders like a vulture. The old woman's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, Maria felt a chill slithered down her spine. "Congratulations, anak," Lola Zelda crooned, her voice like dry leaves scraping against stone. She reached into the folds of her shawl and pulled out a small wooden box, its surface carved with strange, twisting symbols that seemed to shift under the light. A gift for the bride. Maria hesitated. She had never received anything from Lola Zelda before, not even on her birthdays. But the guests were watching, their smiles expectant. Swallowing her unease, she took the box. It was heavier than it looked, and cold, as if it had been kept in a cellar for years. "Salamat ko," she murmured, forcing a smile. Aling Rosa, Maria's oldest friend and the village midwife, stepped forward, her sharp eyes narrowing at the box. "What is that?" she asked, her voice low. "Just a family heirloom," Lola Zelda said smoothly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Something to protect her in her new life." Aling Rosa didn't look convinced. She had heard the stories about Lola Zelda, how her first husband died screaming, how the crops on her land grew twisted and black, how the dogs in her neighborhood would howl at nothing in the dead of night. But today was a day of celebration, so she held her tongue. The reception was held under a canopy of banana leaves in Miguel's backyard. The tables groaned under the weight of lechon, pancit, and tubs of sweet, sticky kakanin. Laughter and music filled the air, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her back. Every time she glanced around, Lola Zelda was there, watching, waiting. When the last guest had left and the moon hung high in the sky, Maria finally allowed herself to relax. She sat on the edge of her marriage bed, still in her wedding dress, and turned the strange wooden box over in her hands. The carving seemed to pulse under her fingertips, as if alive. "Are you going to open it?" Miguel asked, sitting beside her. Maria bit her lip. "I don't know. Something about it feels wrong." Miguel chuckled. "It's just a box, Maria. Maybe it's jewelry." With a deep breath, she lifted the lid. The inside was lined with red cloth, faded and stained. Nestled in the center were 3 objects: a lock of jet black hair tied with red string, a small black candle that smelled of rotting flowers, and a crude doll made of straw and cloth, its chest pierced with rusty pins. Maria recoiled, her breath catching in her throat. What is this?" Miguel's face paled. He had heard tales of such things from his lolo, dark objects used in gulam, the old magic of curses. Before he could speak, the candle's wick sparked to life its own, its flame burning an unnatural shade of blue. And then the doll's head turned. Its stitched mouth stretched into a grin. Maria screamed. Outside, the dogs began to howl. Maria's scream tore through the silent night, sharp and raw like the cry of a wounded animal. Miguel lunged forward, slamming the wooden box shut with a force that sent the cursed objects rattling inside. The blue flame snuffed out instantly, plunging the room back into darkness. But the air remained thick with the scent of something burnt and sickly sweet, like funeral flowers left too long in the sun. "What the hell was that?" Miguel gasped, his hands shaking as he held the box away from them, as if it might burst open again at any moment. Maria couldn't answer. Her breath came in short, panicked gulps, her fingers clutching at the bedsheets as if they might anchor her to reality. The doll's grin, stitched and crude, had burned itself into her mind. She'd heard of Barang before, the dark witchcraft spoken of in hushed tones by the elders, but she had never believed, not truly, not until now. Miguel, ever practical, strode to the window and hurled the box out into the night. It landed somewhere in the tall grass behind their house with a dull thud. "There," he said, turning back to her, his eyes betraying his fear. Gone. But Maria knew better. The fever dreams begin. That night, Maria dreamed. She stood in a vast, empty field under a moon so large it filled half the sky, its pale light turning the grass around her into silver blades. In the distance, a figure shuffled toward her, bent and slow, wrapped in a black shawl. Lola Selda. The old woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, Maria felt the words slither into her ears like worms, cold and wet. "You should have obeyed." Maria tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The ground beneath her softened, sucking at her feet like wet mud. Lola Selda raised a gnarled hand, and the doll from the box appeared in her palm, its pinned chest now oozing something dark and thick. "You will learn." Maria woke with a strangled gasp, her body drenched in sweat. The room was freezing, though the night was warm. Beside her, Miguel slept soundly, undisturbed. She reached for him, then recoiled. Black veins, thin as spider silk, crept up her arm. The sickness spread. By morning, the veins had faded, but Maria's skin was hot to the touch. "A fever," Miguel insisted, fetching water and a damp cloth. But as the hours passed, her condition worsened. Her joints ached as if rusted, her head pounded like a drum, and when she tried to eat, the food turned to ash in her mouth. Aling Rosa came by midday, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She took one look at Maria's pallid face and the way her fingers trembled around her cup of ginger tea, and her expression darkened. "This is no fever," she muttered, pressing a wrinkled hand to Maria's forehead. Then lower, "Someone has cursed you." Miguel scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Curses aren't real." Aling Rosa fixed him with a glare that could wither crops, then explained the box. Silence. Maria's breath hitched. "Lola Selda?" Aling Rosa nodded grimly. "She was always different. Even when we were girls, there were stories. Stories of animals dying mysteriously on her property, of neighbors falling ill after quarrels with her, of a man who once tried to court her sister and was later found dead in his home, his body twisted like a broken doll." "She knows the old ways," Aling Rosa whispered, "the forbidden ones." The first sign of the curse. That evening, Maria's skin erupted in dark, bruise-like patches. Not bruises, though. Marks. swirling, unnatural, as if something beneath her flesh was writing in a language no one could read. Miguel, now terrified, wanted to take her to the hospital in the city, but Aling Rosa stopped him. "No doctor can cure this," she said. "You need someone who understands Kulam." There was only one person in our barangay who had survived the Barang attack, Tangay Isko, the old fisherman who lived near the mangroves. The villagers called him crazy, but Aling Rosa knew better. He fought among Kukulam once and lived. The journey to Tandang Isko. The path to Tandang Isko's hut was overgrown, the air thick with the smell of salt and rotting wood. Mangrove roots twisted like skeletal fingers out of the black water, and the only sounds were the distant cries of herons and the slosh of something moving just beneath the surface. Maria, weak and leaning on Miguel, felt eyes on her the entire way. Tandang Isko's home was little more than a shack on stilts, its walls patched with rusted tin and driftwood. The old man himself sat on the porch, skin like sun-dried leather, his milky left eye staring blindly ahead, while the right one fixed on Maria with unsettling focus. "Ah," he said, before they could speak. "You've been baranged." Maria's knees buckled. Inside, by the light of a single oil lamp, Tandang Isko examined Maria's markings, his fingers tracing the patterns with a frown. "This is barang, a slow curse, meant to make you suffer before it kills you." Miguel's fists clenched. "How do we stop it?" Tandang Isko's gaze flicked to him. "You don't. Not unless you find who sent it." Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "Lola Selda?" Tandang Isko nodded grimly. "Then you must break her first." The ritual begins. Tandang Isko gathered strange things: a black chicken, a bowl of seawater mixed with ashes, a dagger with the blade darkened by old blood. "The curse is tied to your blood now," he told Maria. "To remove it, we must turn it back on its sender." Maria hesitated. What happens to her? Tandang Isko's smile was grim. "The same thing that was meant for you." As the ritual reached its peak, the chants rising, the candle flames twisting unnaturally, a distant scream echoed through the night. It came from the direction of Lola Selda's house. Maria's markings burned like fire, then vanished. For the first time in days, she could breathe. But as Tandang Isko warned, wiping his dagger clean, some curses don't end. They wait. Outside, the dogs began to howl again. The silence after the scream was worse than the sound itself. It hung in the air like a held breath, thick and suffocating, pressing against Maria's eardrums until she thought she might scream just to break it. Miguel's hand was warm around hers, but it did nothing to chase away the chill that had settled deep in her bones. Then Tandang Isko stood motionless by the door of his hut, his milky eye fixed on the distant shadow of Lola Selda's house, his nostrils flaring as if he could smell the dark magic curling through the night. "Is it done?" Miguel asked, his voice too loud in the quiet. Then Tandang Isko didn't answer right away. He turned back to Maria, his good eye narrowing as he studied her face. The black veins that had crept across her skin were gone, but the weight of the curse lingered in the way her breath still came too fast, in the way her fingers twitched against the fabric of her dress. "The curse is broken," he said at last. "For now." Maria swallowed. "What do you mean, for now?" The old man moved to the center of the room, where the remnants of the ritual lay scattered. The black chicken's feathers, the bowl of ashen water now still and dark. He stirred it with one gnarled finger. "Barang is not just a curse. It is a living thing, hungry, patient. It does not let go so easily." A gust of wind rattled the shutters and the oil lamp flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls like grasping hands. Maria shuddered. She could still feel it, the weight of the doll's gaze, the way its stitched mouth had curled into a smile. Lola Zelda, she... Dead? Tendong Isko's lips twisted. No, not yet. But she is hurt, and a wounded mangkukulam is more dangerous than a cornered snake. Miguel's grip on Maria's hand tightened. Then what do we do? The old man's gaze slid to the dagger on the table, its blade still smeared with Maria's blood. We finish it. The path back to the village was darker than before. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds, and the only light came from Miguel's flickering lantern, its glow barely enough to keep the encroaching shadows at bay. Maria walked between him and Tendong Isko, her steps unsteady, her body still weak from the curse. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl made her heart stutter. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the trees. Lola Zelda's house stood at the edge of the village, half hidden by overgrown bushes and twisted vines. It had always looked unwelcoming, even in daylight, the wood warped in gray with age, the windows shuttered tight like closed eyes. But now, in the dead of night, it seemed to breathe. The air around it hummed with a low, unnatural energy, like the buzz of flies before a storm. Then Lung Isko raised a hand, stopping them at the gate. "Wait here," he ordered, his voice barely higher than a whisper. Maria wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat as the old man stepped forward, and the gate swung open on its own. The inside of the house was worse. The smell hit Maria first, thick and cloying, the stench of rotting herbs and something older, something metallic and sour. Blood. The walls were lined with jars of murky liquid, floating with things she didn't want to identify. Dried plants hung from the ceiling, their leaves brittle and black. And in the center of the room, a low table held a scattering of bones and candles, their wax melted into grotesque shapes. And there, in the corner, hunched over like a broken doll, was Lola Zelda. She was alive but barely. Her skin was sallow, stretched too tight over her bones, and her breath came in wet, ragged gasps. The front of her dress was stained dark, and as she turned her head toward them, Maria saw why. A wound, deep and angry, seeped at her chest, as if something had clawed its way out from inside. "You," Lola Zelda croaked, her voice like rusted hinges. Her eyes, still sharp, still burning with hate, locked onto Maria. "You ungrateful girl." Tendong Isko stepped between them, his dagger raised. "Enough, Zelda. It ends tonight." The woman's lips peeled back in a grin, her teeth stained pink with blood. "You think you've won?" She laughed, a wet, choking sound. "You have no idea what you've started." Before anyone could move, she lunged, not at them, but at the table. Her fingers closed around a small cloth-wrapped bundle, and with a strength that shouldn't have been possible, she hurled it into the fire. The flames roared to life, turning an unnatural green. And somewhere, deep in the village, a dog began to howl. Then another, and another. Tendong Isko's face went pale. "Out!" he snarled, shoving Maria and Miguel toward the door. "Now!" They barely made it past the threshold before the first scream rang out, not from the house, but from the village. Then another, and another. Maria turned just in time to see Lola Zelda's body collapse, her empty eyes still fixed on hers. And in the fire, the doll smiled.
The night erupted into chaos. Maria's legs moved before her mind could process what was happening. Her bare feet slapping against the dirt path as she ran, Miguel's hand clamped around her wrist like a vice. Behind them, Tendong Isko's labored breathing rasped in the dark, his dagger clutched tight in his shaking grip. The village was waking in terror. Lanterns flickered to life in windows, doors slammed. Somewhere, a child wailed. And beneath it all, the dogs. Not howling now, whimpering. Maria's lungs burned as they reached the first house. Old man Baryo stood frozen in his doorway, his face slack with horror as he stared past them toward the rice fields. Maria turned. The fields were moving. Not the stalks, something between them. Shadows darker than the night slithered through the crops, low to the ground, their shapes twisting like smoke given purpose. One of the village boys, brave or stupid, ran forward with a torch and screamed as something yanked him into the black. The torch tumbled, its light catching the thing's face for just an instant. Maria wished it hadn't. Yellow eyes. Too many teeth. Skin like rotted leather stretched over bones that bent the wrong way. Then the shadow swallowed it again, and the boy's screams cut off with a wet crunch. Inside, Tandang Isko shoved them toward Daryo's house. Barang doesn't just curse people, it feeds. The old man barred the door as the village erupted. Glass shattered, wood splintered. And beneath the screams, a new sound. The wet, tearing noise of something eating. Maria pressed her back against the wall, her hands clamped over her mouth. Miguel stood rigid beside her, a bolo knife lifted in shaking hands. Daryo's grandchildren huddled in the corner, their mother praying frantically to saints who clearly weren't listening. Tandang Isko pressed his ear to the door. "They're not after us," he muttered. "Not yet." "Then who?" "The marked ones." His milky eye fixed on Maria. Those touched by Selda's magic. Her offerings. A fresh scream pierced the night. This one from the direction of Aling Rosa's house. Maria's blood turned to ice. She was moving before she realized it, wrenching the door open despite Tandang Isko's shout. The path to Rosa's home was a nightmare of overturned carts and dark stains that glistened in the moonlight. Shadows darted at the edges of her vision, but she ran anyway, Miguel's footsteps pounding behind her. They were too late. Rosa's front door hung broken on its hinges. Inside, the walls were painted in long, dripping streaks. Something wet and glistening lay piled in the corner. And in the center of the room, perfectly untouched, sat a wooden box. Maria's box. The one Miguel had thrown away. Its lid was open. The doll was gone. From the darkness outside, something giggled. Not a human sound. Not an animal's either. Miguel grabbed Maria's arm. "We need to..." The roof caved in. Wood splintered as something massive and reeking dropped through the thatch. All matted fur and two long limbs, its muzzle dripping onto Maria's face as it snarled. The bolo knife flashed as Miguel swung and shattered against the creature's hide like glass. Fandangisco's voice roared from the doorway, ancient words that made the air vibrate. The thing hissed, recoiling, as if struck, then melted back into the shadows. Silence. Then from somewhere terrifyingly close, the sound of tiny footsteps. Pat, pat, pat. Like a child running barefoot across hardwood. Pat, pat, pat. Coming down the hall. The doll's grinning face appeared in the doorway, its button eyes reflecting moonlight it shouldn't have been able to catch. Its pins in its chest gleamed, each one threaded with a strand of Maria's hair. Its stitched mouth moved. "Found you." Tandangisco's dagger struck true, impaling the doll to the wall with a thunk. It thrashed, squealing like a stuck pig, black ooze bubbling from its mouth. Outside, every shadow shrieked in response. Tandangisco's voice roared from the doorway. Ancient words that made the air vibrate. The thing hissed, recoiling, as if struck, then melted back into the shadows. Silence. Then from somewhere terrifyingly close, the sound of tiny footsteps. Pat, pat, pat. "Run," the old man whispered. Then the walls breathed in.
and the night tore itself apart.
The air reeked of upturned earth and rotting meat when Maria came to. Not in her bed, not in Alingrosa's house, but somewhere damp and cold, where the packed dirt floor clung to her skin like a dead tongue. The last thing she remembered were the walls breathing, Totoong Isko shouting, and that smile, that damned red-stitched smile of the doll. Miguel lay beside her, unconscious, a thin trail of blackened blood leaking from his ear. When Maria tried to move, jagged pain stabbed through her ribs, but worse than the pain was the weight in her chest, the same heaviness she'd felt when she first opened the box. Something inside her was wrong. The sound of dragging hooves on dirt made her heart stop. Not horse hooves, these were uneven, trembling, as if the walker had broken legs relearning how to move. The voice that followed turned her blood to ice. "Awake, my daughter." Lola Selda sat on a broken stool in the corner of what Maria now saw was a rotting hut. But this wasn't the Lola Selda they knew, not anymore. The wound on the old woman's chest still wept, but now it seemed part of her, like a second grinning mouth. Her skin was marked with the same black patterns Maria had borne, except hers moved, squirming beneath the flesh like worms. What did you do to us?" Maria swallowed a scream as something twisted inside her when she tried to sit up. Lola Selda laughed, a wet sound that ended in a cough. "Me? Nothing you didn't earn." She held up a hand that had one too many fingers. "You thought you could kill me with your drunk fisherman's tricks? I am the blood and bone of this land long before your grandparents were seeds in their mothers' bellies." Miguel woke up with a gasp, eyes wild. When he saw Lola Selda, a snarl tore from his throat and he lunged, only to collapse face first, his body refusing to obey. "Ah, the husband." Lola Selda smiled, her teeth visibly sharper now. "He'll suffer more for trying to kill me." Maria tasted bile as she finally understood. The marks on her skin, the weight in her chest. You put something inside me?" The old woman tilted her head, like a teacher pleased with a slow student. "Yes, my sweet ingrate, you carry a piece of my barang now. Not enough to kill you, yet. Just enough to change you." Outside the hut, the ground trembled with heavy footsteps, many footsteps. Lola Selda smiled wider. "My children are hungry, and tonight..." She raised her hands, and Maria saw her nails had become blackened hooves. "Tonight, the village will feed them." Miguel managed to drag himself toward Maria, his face a mask of pain and fury. "We'll kill you," he spat. Lola Selda laughed again, and now her voice carried echoes that weren't human. "I'm already dead, fool. But you two..." Her eyes gleamed in the dark, just like the doll's had. "You will live a very, very long time." The hut door creaked open on its own. Outside, beneath a moonless sky, the shadows were moving toward the village. And inside Maria's ribs, something breathed in answer. The first scream came from the direction of the river. Maria knew that voice. It belonged to young Taylor, the fisherman's daughter who always brought her fresh crabs on Sundays. The sound didn't end so much as change, warping mid-cry into something wet and gurgling before being cut off with a crunch that Miguel's body go rigid beside her. Lola Selda rose from her stool, her bones popping like firecrackers. The wound on her chest yawned wider, revealing glimpses of something glistening and black moving inside. "Listen well," she crooned. "That's the sound of your village learning its place." Maria's hands flew to her own chest, where the weight pulsed in time with the distant screams. When she pressed too hard, her fingers sank in, just slightly, as if testing rotten fruit. She gagged, but no bile came up. Just a thick, syrupy darkness that coated her tongue and tasted of old blood and spoiled milk. Miguel grabbed her wrist. His eyes were bloodshot, veins standing out like cracks in porcelain. "Run," he mouthed silently. Lola Zelda's head snapped toward them. "Oh no, my dears. You'll stay." She flicked a finger, and the walls breathed inward, exhaling a swarm of fat black flies that settled on Miguel's skin. Where they landed, his flesh puckered and split, like overripe fruit, yet no blood flowed, just a slow ooze of something tar-like and shimmering. Maria tried to scream, but the thing inside her chest squeezed, and what came out was a choked wheeze. The weight was growing, taking shape. She could feel it forming ridges and hollows against her ribs, something with teeth. Outside, the night had gone unnaturally quiet, except for the occasional wet rip of flesh parting. Then, tap, tap, tap. Small bare feet approaching the hut. The doll appeared in the doorway, now life-sized, its cloth skin stretched taut over twitching muscle. The pins in its chest had grown into rusted nails, and where its straw hair had been, now hung strands of real black hair. Maria recognized ailing Rosa's silver streaks mixed in. "Mother is hungry," it rasped in tandem Iskel's voice. Lola Zelda stroked its head lovingly. "Bring us the children first, the tender ones." The doll's head rotated 180 degrees to face the village. "Yes, the little bones sing prettiest." As it scampered off into the dark, Maria finally understood the true horror. This wasn't just revenge. Lola Zelda was building something, and the thing growing inside Maria was the key. Miguel's hand found hers, his fingers now too long, the nails hardening into contunious points. The change was starting in him too. Somewhere in the village, a baby began to cry. The thing in Maria's chest purred. The baby's cry cut off abruptly. Maria's teeth ached, a deep, unnatural throbbing that pulsed in time with the thing nesting beneath her ribs. She pressed her tongue to her canines and felt them, sharper now, the enamel flaking away to reveal something darker beneath. Miguel was changing faster. His spine arched suddenly, with a sound like green wood splitting. The flies that had settled on him were buried now, absorbed into the weeping cracks spreading across his skin. When he opened his mouth to gasp, a fat black centipede crawled out over his lower lip. Lola Zelda clapped her hands in delight. "Ooh, the Barang takes well to him." She leaned in close, her breath smelling of turned earth and spoiled honey. Men always rot from the inside first. But you, Maria, yours will be a slower becoming. The walls of the hut shuddered. Outside, the night air had taken on a greasy quality, the starlight bending unnaturally around the shapes moving through the village. Maria caught glimpses between the bamboo slats. Old man Baryo being pulled apart like warm bread, his screams cut short as something crammed his own severed arm down his throat. The Cruz twins running hand in hand until the ground itself opened up beneath them, swallowing them whole before snapping shut with teeth made of splintered bamboo. And the doll, grown to the size of a man now, dancing through the chaos with its nails gleaming wet, stitching the air with trails of black thread that seemed to hold the night itself in place. Maria's vision doubled suddenly. For a moment, she saw through two sets of eyes, her own and another's. The village spread out beneath her like a living map, every terrified heartbeat a pulsing red light. She could taste their fear like copper on her tongue. The thing inside her chest purred again. "This is right," it whispered in a voice that was almost hers. "This is how the world should be."
Miguel made a wet, choking sound, his jaw unhinged with a sickening pop, stretching wider than humanly possible as something moved beneath his skin, something with too many legs. Lola Zelda stroked his cheek lovingly. "Soon you'll be beautiful," she crooned. Then to Maria, "And you, my daughter, will birth us a new world." Maria's hands flew to her belly. It was swelling, not with child, with something older. The first contraction hit like a hot knife between her ribs. She screamed, but what came out was the doll's laughter, high and cruel and stitched with malice. Somewhere in the burning village, the earth began to sing. Maria's fingernails splintered against the dirt floor as the contraction rolled through her. Not pain, not exactly. It felt like her bones were being unwoven, each rib separating like curtains to make room for what was coming. Miguel crouched in the corner, his body now a twitching mass of exposed tendons and chitinous plates. His mouth kept opening and opening, a black hole stretching vertically down his ruined face. When he breathed, the sound was like wind through a hollow log. Lola Zelda circled Maria, dragging one elongated fingernail along her trembling stomach. The skin there was translucent now, stretched drum-tight over something dark and squirming. "Can you feel it?" she whispered. "How hungry our child is." Outside, the village had gone silent, not peaceful, waiting. The doll's stitches glimmered at the doorway, its body now swollen with stolen parts. Alingros's fingers knotted into its hair, Tandang Isko's milky eye blinking from its palm. Another contraction, Maria arched backward as her spine cracked. And the thing inside her pushed back. Lola Zelda's laughter turned to static. Yes, it knows its mother. Maria's vision swam. For a terrifying moment, she saw through the thing's eyes again. The village wasn't destroyed, but transformed. The houses pulsed like living organs, their bamboo walls now veined with black ichor. The river ran thick and red, its surface dotted with floating teeth. And the people? The people were blossoming. Old man Baryo knelt by the water, his mouth split ear to ear as ferns unfurled from his tongue. The Cruz twins sat back to back, their skin fused at the shoulders, giggling as mushrooms sprouted from their eye sockets. Beautiful, the thing inside her sighed. Miguel made a sound like a dying engine. His body collapsed inward, skin splitting to reveal wet black carapace beneath. His fingers fused together, forming hooked claws that scraped meaningless symbols into the dirt. Lola Zelda pressed her lipless mouth to Maria's bulging stomach. "Come now, little god. Time to meet your kingdom." Maria's last human thought was of her mother's face, a memory she hadn't realized the curse had left intact. Then, her skin burst. Not outward, inward. The thing didn't tear its way free so much as absorb her, Maria's flesh melting like wax over its emerging form. She had one dizzying moment of dual vision, seeing both through human eyes and the thing's many-faceted gaze, before her consciousness folded into its darkness. The last thing she heard was Lola Zelda's shriek of triumph, turning to horror. "Wait! You weren't supposed to take me too!" Then only the village singing, and the new god laughing, and the earth itself breathing in time with their shared heart. The dawn did not come. The sun rose. Maria felt it in what remained of her bones, in the new hollow places where her organs used to be. But its light could not penetrate the black threads now stitched through the sky. The doll had sewn the clouds together with veins of rotting silk, and through the gaps oozed a thick, honey-colored twilight that stuck to the transformed villagers like cobwebs. Maria walked through what had been her home. Her steps made no sound.
The ground softened where she stepped, curling up like worshipful fingers. The houses were alive now. Walls pulsed with slow, steady heartbeats. Windows blinked with wet, knowing eyes. Doors opened and closed like hungry mouths, whispering in voices made of rustling leaves and cracking bone. Miguel, or what had been Miguel, scuttled along the rooftops on too many legs, his body a living cathedral of chitin and weeping sores. Where his shadow fell, the earth sprouted black flowers that sang in voices stolen from the dead. Lola Zelda was everywhere and nowhere. Maria could feel her, taste her in every corrupted root, in every drop of poisoned rain. The old woman's curse had birthed something even she could not control, and now her essence was unraveled, stitched into the very fabric of the nightmare she had created. The doll sat at the center of the village, its body now grown to monstrous proportions, its stitches straining to contain the stolen flesh within. It was singing. No, they were singing. Maria pressed a hand to her chest, or where her chest had once been. The hollow space there ached with a terrible understanding. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The doll turned its head, too far, too fast, and grinned at her with the mouth now lined with Lola Zelda's teeth. "Mother, we are hungry again." And beyond the village, beyond the cursed fields and the poisoned river, the first lights of the next town flickered in the false twilight, waiting, unaware, delicious. Maria smiled and took her first step forward.